Good morning and welcome to another episode of Unpublic with Citizen Stewart. That is me, and good morning to you. Today, I want to talk about how we get a story so wrong in a city and create myths that don't serve us. I want to talk a little bit about Chicago. So if you don't live in Chicago and you haven't been there and you live at a distance, you're far away from Chicago, it would be easy to fall into a trap of talking about that city as if it's a flat cartoon full of violence and people who don't care about the law or don't care about themselves, don't care about their communities. And that's the way that you can talk about a place when you're not from that place. That's the way that you can talk about a place when you never walked in that place. You don't know what it's about. You can say those things from a point of privilege and ignorance about Chicago. And I think it's really important when you see such a wrong story being told about our people, our communities, our children, our families, our political situations, our economic situations in a major metropolis like Chicago without digging in and getting to the real story. Today, we're going to talk with someone who can help us unpack the real story of children, families, and activism in a place like Chicago. We'll be right back after the other side and jump into our conversation. And here we go. Let's learn in peace. We got Cleopatra Draper, who is a community organizer, activist, radio all-star, person who does it all in the city of Chicago, and could probably help us unpack a little bit about why we got Chicago so messed up when we talk about it from a national level. Cleopatra, good morning. Thank you for joining.
Hey, good morning, Chris. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity and the platform that you developed to speak the truth. So let's go with it.
Well, do you buy my premise, my initial premise of we got Chicago messed up?
Totally. I mean, the narrative of Chicago is so intriguing to me because the media edifies the sensationalism of death and destruction so much that Chicago oftentimes is the epitome of that. And that's not the life we live. There are episodes and areas of distraught, trauma, and poverty, affordable housing and the lack thereof, violence. But that sounds like every metropolitan city in the nation. Chicago's just very much so popular, a home of a lot of talent, grit, and folks that are getting it straight out the mud, or as I would like to say, roses that rise from the concrete. So when we talk about the epidemic of gun violence, the sensationalism goes hand in hand with Chicago. So, right now we dating until, we break up and then another city takes the reins. But for right now, we've been in the limelight, and it's unfortunate from that perspective.
Yeah, I just think it was just yesterday or day before yesterday, saw a news report that Indianapolis actually has overtaken Chicago in terms of incidents. And it's like, really, Indianapolis? And that's a very different city than Chicago. So the idea that it can happen anywhere is really important. But what do you think is underneath the incidents of violence in a city? I mean, I could think of a number of things that we would try and pin it on. We could pin it on segregation. We could pin it on unattentive leaders who actually, you just said roses and concrete. They actually are not trying to plant any soil. They're trying to keep it, they're trying to pave over the problems. In Chicago, I don't know a lot about it, but I just remember hearing things like when they decided to tear down public housing, that was the gift that kept on giving. Like, you being there, what would you pin it on most? Or can we even say it's anything that we would pin it on most? It might just be several things.
When you think of an onion, is layered, right? So what you just named, let's start from the public housing perspective and the catastrophe that it presented. When you tear down an entity that has housed generations of Black folks, many of whom migrated here from the South. My family was one of them. We were just fortunate enough that my grandmother was an entrepreneur and actually got out and purchased a home in West Pullman, which is actually in my ward. Um, every family wasn't that fortunate, and that process that we know that is called cyclical poverty continued. So when you disembody something that is many of what people knew, and you just disperse them, right? Every man for themselves. That has wreaked havoc ever since because there was no plan. And that was under Mayor Daley's administration. But right now, all I see is guns blazing and finger pointing at the current administration, which is the Lightfoot administration, as though historically there was not a precedence here of leadership that continue to disembody Black communities. Right. And when I say disembody, that means not arm and guard them with the resources that we so rightfully deserve, whether it's from the lens as a taxpaying citizen or from a humanitarian standpoint. Let's just speak just as humans in decency. That wasn't allowed. So when you tear down the Ickeys and Cabrini Green and Robert Taylor and so on and so forth, Ida B. Wells, I could name so many more housing projects that were dismantled. Where did those people go? They went in communities, they went in cities, they went in states like yours because the Section 8 list was held with an iron fist, like Stalin's rule. With an iron fist. And anybody know anything about the leadership of Stalin? Eventually he fell, but for a period of time, he stood strong. So when you rule with an iron fist and gridlock, what's the number one need that you have to have outside of water and food? Shelter. People went where they could. And because you had been contained, some of the housing units were high rises to row homes. Now you're infiltrating communities and where you've never been acclimated, right? It's not to say that you can't, but we all have to learn what it means to live in a community, what quality of life looks like. That nobody gave a damn. There's no plan. Hence why Marcy Projects is still standing in New York, because they know better.
They know better than to tear it down. Yeah.
You feel me? Like,
yeah,
they know better. You know what's going to happen. So just to do that, to seize the land that many of these entities sat on was valuable. And the cost that it has cost us has been generational catastrophe, whether it's death, mayhem, and so on and so forth. That's what our lives and our bodies were worth. Where Cabrini Green once sat, multi-million-dollar condos stand. Where Ida B. Wells once was, is Bronzeville is bustling, booming, so on and so forth. The Ickeys, that's towards the South Loop. That was prime property here in Chicago.
So you mean to tell me, though, like when you broke down those properties and you sold them for hundreds of millions of dollars, that money was given directly to the families that had been living in the projects, right? Like it was transferred. They took those hundreds of millions of dollars because the land was valuable and poor people were on the land. And we know that land transfers actually make the world go around. So, I mean, of course, Chicago tore down those very valuable pieces of land, the housing on them, and gave that money to the poor people that had been living there so that they could go off and become enfranchised in the American system of home ownership, right? I mean, of course, Chicago did that, right?
A dope book. I don't know who wrote it.
Yeah. That's not what happened?
Wow. What it does is that, there's a rule. Wherever you build new infrastructure, X amount percentage has to be given to affordable housing. What developers have gotten away with, they'll pay the fine before they give the affordable housing.
Wow. So the fine's not very big.
I mean, when you're a developer in this game, in this city, you're talking that check you'll write any day before you mix oranges with apples, so to speak.
So we need bigger fines then.
I mean, but from a capitalist society, if you can't cut the check, you can't play in the game.
Mm.
So it doesn't matter how much you up the fine. If you all ante up, if it's 10 of us and this is the way we want to gridlock it, we'll pay the fine. The
Yeah.
problem is that we've allowed this behavior to continue as opposed to a cease and desist, because we know it as our grassroots folk would say, it ain't right. Yeah, I'm of the firm belief everybody deserves a place to call home. Amen. I
Mm-hmm.
don't care if it's
Mm-hmm.
a tiny house, and I love tiny houses. Nobody's asking for a mansion. They're
Mm-hmm.
asking for a place to call home.
Mm-hmm.
And here in Chicago, as a consequence of the debacle between affordability, safety, they define it as public safety, you have tent city growing at masses. And what does that mean? Folks are literally living in tents or whatever they can find shelter, and our viaducts are consumed, and they come through, they being streets and sands, often discarding what folks have built, and that's all they have. Our shelters at capacity is not enough, so just from that lens alone, when you ask me about the narrative of Chicago, whether it's right-wing media or to the left,
Mm-hmm.
the middle is the truth. And the truth is, when you look at this onion, no matter which layer, whether it's affordable housing, education, public safety, health, SDOH, it is what it is. How can one live in an environment where they don't have a fighting chance and actually thrive without being devoured? So this system that we call the city of Chicago is totally uh, gobbling up the working poor. I don't call
Mm-hmm.
it the working class.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us during this global pandemic have finally realized you've been working for poor wages, which is why America is begging you to come back.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just keep it real.
I'm gonna keep it all the way real. America ain't gonna beg too much longer.
No,
Y'all don't want to take them jobs. Y'all don't want to like get in. Listen, I'm tell you right now, I know America very well. Me and America on first name basis. She ain't gonna play that for too long. Poor people have a world of hurt coming their direction. And I don't think we're paying enough attention to it right now. Which brings me to a different question about Chicago. You mentioned your family came up like most people did from the South to Chicago. So there was a point in time when Black folks specifically, were going to Oakland, Milwaukee, Gary, Chicago, even as far as like Seattle, like to get out of the South. And that's why you got Black communities in all of those places. Well, there was industrial opportunity back then that was drawing them. There were jobs and there were housings and there was new like Chicago. There was things, or I'm sorry, Detroit. There were like things that were booming. But what we've seen in the last, I want to say 15 years or so or more, is a reverse migration. Is like Black folks going back down south. This is going to sound like a super simplistic question, but why stay in Chicago as things like escalate in terms of costs and you can't live anywhere? Like there's people buying up like the gentrification and all of that type of stuff. It can sound too simplistic, I know.
No, it's
But
not.
but why stay there and not get out somewhere where things cost a little? The cost of living is not as bad as Chicago.
Well, like I said, my brother has been in Minnesota for nearly 20 years, and you sound like him. And for the past 20 years, he has begged me to leave.
You're welcome to come.
Many of us are of the mindset to stand your ground. The goal is to price Black people out of here. In fact, on my show, Rebuilding Black Chicago, we were just talking about the exodus of Black folks because the census data is out. And 85,000 Black people have left in a 10-year span. And what one would say is that, oh, that's due to the violence and all of this stuff. And you're right, no matter which way you turn, whether it's violence, affordability, schools, and etc., what's enticing? the land. You know,
Mm-hmm.
everybody not living a hard knock life in Chicago.
No.
It's only some of us, and it's been that way for quite some time. So, as a community organizer, do I stand and fight or do I leave? And at what cost am I willing to sacrifice? And I've sacrificed a lot. I have been shot at, I've been through the storm, and still I rise. You know why? Because as long as I can walk in a standing room, I'll be there. Because the goal is to push us out. Chicago, as the predecessor of Mayor Lightfoot said, is a world-class city. And that's code for if you can afford it, then you stay. If you can't, you go. And once you go, you can't come back no more. And it's not that we're a gated city, but because of the historical entrenchedness of the redlining, like you mentioned, the segregationist attitude, we are notorious for being very divided culturally. There's a gate, but there's not a gate. You know where you belong and you know where you ought not go. And there's a place for you. And essentially what's happening is the invasion, you call it gentrification, of folks that are not of color, black, brown, otherwise, taking inward into the city. So the reverse is real. At one point in time, historically, there was white flight where white residents flew out the city and went into the suburbs. Then they switched. And as a result, black folks are in the suburbs paying ridiculous property taxes. We have the highest property taxes in the nation.
I've heard about this. I
Oh,
have heard about this, and it's
insane.
ridiculous. Yeah.
It's insane. It's to the point where the value of your home is top down. Like you don't win, you're losing. So now you got tricked because many of the suburbs was on swamp water. Now you got tricked for that grass is greener with that picket fence, thinking you're gonna live this life, while they didn't switch the code and run into the city and price us out. I'll give you this: if you go on Redfin right now, in the hood, in the neighborhood, the lowest house is $230,000. I've never
Yeah,
seen.
see, that's not gonna happen. And this is, I do not understand. I do not understand. So you're helping me understand a little bit. I did want to put this up just basically to show Chicago is not the only place, but Chicago, like lots of cities, have had a loss of Black population. And there's been a net increase in a lot of southern states and cities of Black population. So Black folks are reassembling in some ways in the South. But Los Angeles, DC, Detroit, St. Louis all have lost Black populations. These are urban Black meccas, at one point. And slight increases in population in places like Indianapolis, Philly, Milwaukee, New York City, which is, I think, really interesting. But obviously, Black folks are reassembling. But what you just said hit me in that, watching New Orleans from, where I grew up. You had people knocking on your door at 10 o'clock at night, leaving you business cards saying, I'll buy your house cash money right now. And you had grandma not knowing what that meant. Like, what? You gonna give me $150,000 for this house I paid 60 for or 40 for or 30 for, way back when, not knowing that that's just the city is undergoing a wealth transfer. But when we get to kids, for instance, like parents can't be thinking always about long-term trends. They got to be thinking about their children right now being safe. And I don't think that any parent thinks of anything more than safety first. Like, we can talk about academics, we could talk about all kinds of other stuff, but if you're just not safe, that's going to be at the front of your mind, like food, water, shelter, right? Safety, right? Like all those things are about safety and life, being alive. And I wonder how a parent has any sense of safety when they don't have leaders that are paying attention to their how they make decisions. I'll give you, for instance, that's in the news right now, Afghanistan. People are saying today we should have never been in Afghanistan. But when you have a dumb decision and then you make a dumb decision to correct a dumb decision, Like, so the way we're leaving Afghanistan now is hurting people, right? So if public housing high rises and projects were a bad decision the way that they were executed years ago, but then the way that we get out of them is by tearing them down and just telling people have at it or whatnot. It just shows me at some point the leadership's the problem, and they're constantly going to be causing you problems. And I don't know what they can do to correct that. I mean, do you think that the leadership of Chicago, if I was a person waiting for them to get things right, are they getting better? Are they like starting to make better decisions now? Are they correcting their, I mean, like, listen, when I make a mistake, it affects me and my family. When your leaders make a mistake, it affects everybody.
Yeah.
Right? So does Chicago have the leaders? I guess let me ask the question differently. Does Chicago have the leaders that the kids of Chicago deserve?
No, for many
See, I
reasons.
knew that was going to be an easy answer.
For many reasons, because, you know, no matter what city, state, or country you in, what's the agenda? You know, and oftentimes we get hoodwinked. But here in the city, what I couldn't help but notice, I've worked on a number of campaigns. I myself have ran for alderman, and I'm very honest about that. And I'm gonna give you a key word in the city. As soon as you hear transparency, just dodge and duck all the other words. As a former educator, that's the number one word: transparency. Transparency. I'm gonna keep it a buck. That's what we would say here in Chicago. I say no because historically we've been gridlocked. So what I couldn't help but notice was a trend, and I'm gonna take you to a point of where I just ripped chapters out of Stacey Abrams' book and I run with it. But where am I running with it as a grassroots organizer? When you look at the South and how they're organizing, is phenomenal. And the question is, how are you doing it? The real question is, what is the ask? The ask is for not only new leadership, but where are our young people? And what I see in the South is that they have no problem with elevating young folks into political office. So then I fast forward here to the Midwest. The elders say, well, the young folks not voting, the young folks ain't active, so on and so forth. There are aspects of that I agree with, because oftentimes when I'm in a number of community meetings, whether it's within my ward or across the city, I'm often the youngest in the room. How are we engaging and inviting other millennials to the table is another issue. However, you know, what I've realized is that when you were our age, at a millennial age, whether it's 20s, late 20s, early 30s, you were raising a family, so on and so forth, and dedicated to the causes in your life, yada, yada, yada. Now, as I'm willing to lay down all of that and get in the thick of it, in the weeds, what do you tell me? Oh, you too young. What's your resume look like? You been to school? How many children you got? Are you married, baby? What church you go to?
Now I'm going to stop you right now, Cleopatra, because we're about to have a generational war right now. Let me just tell you right now. Listen. You're right. You're right. And then, especially in nonprofit world, we have gatekeeper syndrome, where we got somebody who's been there for 80 years, don't want to give up the top executive ED position because it's the only thing they've ever done, blah, 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 whatever. And they got like 15 people that then left that could have taken that nonprofit to the next generation. So yes, I'm going to validate what you're saying. Absolutely. Gatekeeping. We do it. And in politics, when you have a machine system, a machine political system, that's like 10 times 10, because you got people who are 70 something years old, 80 years old, who it's all they've ever done. So they take every young person as a threat. Like, you know, even young people working for you. So not everyone. No, you know, I speak in generality sometimes.
No, what I was going to say is that there's a difference between you and I, Chris. It's very obvious.
Yeah.
And
what's that?
I'm going to throw the gender out there.
Okay, there's that too.
For a young Black man my age, with my credentials, not even half of my credentials, if he had a nice haircut and a suit, Oh, look at him, just precious Lord.
One at church.
No, not just at church. It could be at the
Yeah.
door. I'll knock a lot of doors.
Yeah.
For me,
Yeah.
well, are you married? How many children you have? Are you asking that man that? He got 3 children by 3
Yeah.
different women, but
Yeah.
he got a nice haircut on in the suit. You're gonna assume he an attorney,
Right.
and he has the credentials, and he can go get the things you need. But as a Black woman, I have to serve up everything and then some just to solidify, not to mention those that won't even acknowledge me because I'm a woman. So I have another hill to climb. In fact, I was at church this weekend, and they were playing I'm coming up on the rough side of the mountain. I don't want to walk on the smooth side because ain't nothing been smooth for me. See, that's the Chicago in me, right? And because I'm a woman, because I'm relatively young, like I tell people, I've had a master's degree since I was 24. Oh, well, you didn't say that. I didn't think I had to. Do you go down the street and ask people what their credentials are? But because I want something more than myself to better our lives, I have to be validated tenfold in order for you to even engage in a conversation with me. It's not enough that I showed up. It's not enough that I'm dedicated. It's not enough that I won't quit. So what's the ask? So when we ask for young folks and you tell me that nobody sent for me, see, that's how my city works. I tell them I'm the somebody nobody sent, and the people have sent me. You understand me? Like it's no longer, I'm not interested in the gatekeeper because you ain't been keeping the gate. You've been letting the lamb be slaughtered for decades. This is no new behavior. This crime in Chicago ain't new.
This is, and I'm agreeing with you, and I'm going to agree with you and validate everything you just said, not because you need it or because you want it from me, just because that's my response. My response is, yeah, okay, I get it. I see that. I'm also, what I was going to push you on earlier, though, is I'm starting to feel my age as somebody who's a Gen Xer who has been a couple of go rounds now. Like, we thought we were the new wave to the boomers, and we were going to kind of buttress some. So we have some experiences too. Nobody ever really talks about Gen X, but we got a few experiences too with the boomers, right? That we had to, like, you know, we encountered gatekeeping. We encountered a lot of false starts. Like, you know, we're talking about a bunch of stuff now to me that I'm starting to feel old about. I'm like, listen, with Rodney King, the first time we saw that on video, we thought that was the end of all ends. Like, what? Oh, it's on film, it's videoed, you know, right? So we thought the whole world was going to change. You know, we've been through this thing like many times now over like three decades of recurring stuff. And boomers who didn't want to get out the way or had their way of doing things, that we were seen as the ones who were going to come in and upset everything. We did, you know, we were supposed to be lazy and all these other things. But now I'm getting to the point where I'm starting to say stuff that the boomers used to say to us, is like, this new generation of activism, it's performative. You got people that do something for 6 months and think that they should be on TV, you know, think that they should be like, you know, I had one young person, and I'm not going to say who it is, but one young person who had one viral video, who then quit her job, threw a party for herself, telling her friends to come and celebrate her accomplishments as she transitioned to her new status, kind of as like a national activist now. So this girl had like this person had 12,000 followers all of a sudden on Twitter. She had a viral video. She literally quit her job and threw a party for herself and invited us to come and celebrate her accomplishments now that she was going to be a national activist, right? So you put out a job. Sometimes you have people that all their last 5 jobs, they only worked for 1 year, and then they wanted to be congressmen, right? You got people running for Congress in some places right now on the why not me ticket. And anyways, I'm not talking about you. I'm just saying you are giving an example of people that are grinding it out from their communities, who are trying to do for their communities, who are indigenous. Well, that's a very important word here. Indigenous to the communities that they want to lead from. And at the same time, activism is going sideways with too many folks that think that it should be an instant step into Congress, or some national fame or notoriety or whatnot. Now, I don't know what y'all got going on in Chicago in terms of activism, Black Lives Matter, you know, good number of young people who don't do the grassroots stuff, but they do the performative stuff. And I think we're in trouble if that's who's really fighting for our kids. Half the time, they don't even know the real issues that our kids are facing and our families are facing. I asked some of these young activists about TANF, about welfare, which is near and dear to my heart. They can't tell me two things about TANF, for instance. And that's how I know we're not serious. That's how I know we're not serious.
Let me respond.
Yes, please do. Because I'm sounding old. I know I'm sounding old, but
no. It's just we blur lines. There's the millennials, and then you have the zennials. So my sister is a zennial. She's 21. So we get clustered a lot. I like to define a line. So I'm certain you're probably talking about a zennial, but there are some millennials that behave that way too. And what you're referring to is actorvism. That's
all right. Damn. Okay.
Let me up it one notch.
Yeah. All right.
I really don't have too much patience for anybody that are activists. And once I discover that, I kind of fall back. And we have them everywhere. You got them in your generation. I got them in mine. And you can't blame them in the right now because look at life, whether it's the music industry to television, sensationalism sells. And you ride that wave and you eat off that plate as much as you can, if that's your hustle. And a lot of activists, that's their hustle. You see what I'm saying? Like, oh, I'm trying to eat. You like what I'm doing? Let me start this non-for-profit and eat. That behavior has been installed for decades. That's nothing new. So it has nothing to do with defining it via generation.
It might not be new, but would you agree that something
down?
I was about to say that something doesn't have to be new to be prevalent in a point in time. It's actually, and I think social media is amplifying it. It's changing. I think social media is changing
totally it. Is because now we're looking from your narrative, and what you're doing is gauging a base, your base building, and gathering folks that trust your word. And like you said, indigenous is the key. So people ain't doing their homework. That's how we had Trump installed. You know, I mean, Trump is the biggest hustler I've ever met. If Chicago was to give him any kudos, look how he eating. He just raised $100 million and got to give 15 plus back because he stole it. I mean, he's the biggest hustler. Yeah. If you want to learn anything about hustling, Trump got it. He's the scammer of all scammers. So to your point, when you have your own megaphone via social media, all you need, like you just said, is one big bite and ride that tidal wave. Now you're generating people to think that you can do something. That's all you need people to do is to believe. That's what Trump did. Believe that I can do something. If you can get people to believe in whatever soup you selling, whatever cereal you eating, now you're in business. And that is horrible. That is the worst kind of horrible leadership because people don't win, especially people that need it the most. That's why she threw herself a party. Because she's self-centered. You know, she didn't do it for anybody but herself.
Well, I mean, this is it. It's like selfie activism. Like you called it activism. It's kind of like, you know, well, if nobody sees me doing it, did it really happen? Right. My years of activism, I can guarantee you that 90% of any of the activism that I do, I mean, I learned the generation before me was very suspicious of there being too many eyes on some of the main things you were trying to accomplish. Right. So my father's generation had learned the COINTELPRO lessons. They had learned the lessons of COINTELPRO, which meant you don't do everything for show. You do a lot of things. A lot goes down in the private meeting. A lot goes down in the back rooms. Right. That's how stuff gets done oftentimes. So anyways, you know, getting back to like activism 2.0, like where are we going to go in terms of activism? I'm looking at our children as the most precious group of people that we have to defend. Like we have to be ruthless defenders of them, and in every city. And we have too much money and too many resources in the cities where these children are for them to be living in third world conditions. It's just like if no one's going to stand up and say it, I'm sick of all the game playing and the running for office and the whatever. All of that to me is immaterial right now. Take me to your leader. Who's responsible here? Right? Like if you have third world conditions in Oakland or San Francisco or Chicago or New York or whatnot, I don't want any excuses because there's no reason for it. You're some of the wealthiest cities on planet Earth and in history. So for you to have faces at the bottom of the well in any of these cities, to me, begs the question, who's in charge here? So if I were to land in Chicago and ask you, you were the first person I bumped into, and I said, Cleopatra, I got this question for y'all. Number one, how are the children? And number two, who's in charge? Like, who do I need to talk to improve things for them? Would there be an easy answer to that second question? Like, who's in charge? Who do we need to target? What do we need to target them with? What do we need to push somebody to do for our kids?
Well, no, there's not an easy answer. And I think strategically it's designed to be like that because of local government. And like I like to remind people, all politics is local. Mm-hmm. So before you start talking to me about President Biden, can you tell me who your alderman is? Can you tell me what your alderman does? Who's over your water reclamation? A lot of times folks don't even know who the circuit court judge is. So we have skipped past so much civics to understand the importance of our quality of life. So when you talk about the children, they have been the pawn of the system since inception because there's too many governing bodies that overlap the outcomes of their quality of life, whether it's under these auspices of education, health, public safety, and etc. They just exist. And that's problematic. So there's no one entity that is held accountable for children. Children are just piecemealed in the equation of leadership. So depending on how your system is governed, for us, Chicago Public Schools is a sister agency of the city, just like the Park District, meaning that although it has its own budget, it still is under the leadership of our administration, Mayor Lightfoot, and our city council body. So, you have a lot of overlap. So when you have all of these people in charge, that skews the lines as to accountability. How do we get a solid answer? You got to go back to this board meeting. You got to go get this approval. It's a rat race. And who's on the decline? The children. Who suffers? The children. What's on the brinks? Black and brown schools. Because when you look at our white schools, who are more affluent, heavily funded, many of our selective enrollment schools, 90% of that population are white students.
So let me stop you right now and ask you this, because there's been a book recently that I read about some of this educational redlining in places like Chicago. I've seen some things like from a distance. Every time I wrote a story a couple years ago about where Chance the rapper went to school, and it made me fall down a rabbit hole of kind of like the educational lottery of education and of opportunity in Chicago that I did not know. These different systems of how. I mean, I read one story, for instance, with magnet schools, that the families that had been in Chicago magnet schools that were selective enrollment that got busted for lying about their addresses, that the wealthier ones were allowed to just pay the tuition. And I said, tuition? What is tuition in a public school? Oh, when you get busted for using the wrong address, you could go to jail as a poor person. As a rich person, you could just pay back the tuition to a public school, right? My main question goes back to the leadership question again. In the Jewish faith and other faiths, when you see something that is structurally inequitable, isn't rightly related to God, it is commanded of you to ask the question, why is it this way? Not just how can I toss out a little policy or program that helps a few people, but how do we structurally change this? Why is there such a thing as a selective enrollment public school in Chicago? Why is there a neighborhood where one side of the neighborhood, on one side of a street going south, you have a school that is living an entirely different existence than if you go north just a couple of blocks from that same point, same destination point, same address? Why is that? Like, how is that allowed? Why is there no activism around? No, 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 no. You can't. Like, we could see the rules. It's naked. We could just see it by design. Like, we got to change the design of things. I get that the mayor might be partially in control, and that I don't know if you have a chancellor or whoever, what y'all have there. Like, is it whoever leads your schools? There's a distributed leadership, I guess, apparently. But has there been any effort to say, no, 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 we're going to change the boundaries and the rules and all that stuff, not just close schools and send kids off to their doom in schools where they don't belong, but we're going to change the structure of things?
Well, you know, that's a big fight for me. I'll give you my background. I've been to 4 schools in my entire life, and that includes my master's degree. I'm a graduate of Jensen Scholastic Academy, and at that time in the 90s, it was a lottery school. My brother wasn't so fortunate. He went to Bethune. Back then in Bethune, they were still, I'm going to say, whooping children. So my mother had stroke after stroke dealing with the craziness of that environment, and she just refused to send me. So we've been through phases of selective enrollment since before I was born, and I'm 34. So when I think about the why and the how did selective enrollment still get accepted, and still stand? Is because folks don't know their own power. And I'm talking about Black people, because I tell this story all the time. I used to work for Chicago Public Schools for about 7 years. I serve on the local school council now. I've been there for about 3. And in that service, I was the post-secondary liaison. So I was charged with sending children to college all across the country and what was deemed some of our most underserved, underperforming schools. And I've had scholars. I closed with a $6 million portfolio. So you can't tell me that certain children aren't college material. I push back on that all the time. One day I got a call from the district office because we were having a Gates Millennial Scholarship Workshop, and we could take our kids to different campuses. And at that time, I worked at South Shore School of Leadership. That was already phased to close out because they built the brand new selective enrollment school across the street. And my children wasn't welcome to come because they wanted to start a new crop, meaning they'll start from freshman year on, and didn't want to mix the environments, even though they all lived in the same community. It was the most insane reason I ever heard. And the community fought like hell. Kudos to them, especially Mr. English, may he rest in peace. And they still was ignored. So I get a call from the district because they wanted to know why was I taking our children to this school in Little Village. It was 4 schools in one. And the history of this school is that the community slept outside for days, 30 plus days, demanding that they build a new school for their children. And this community was brown, Latino. I have an immense amount of respect for what they did. But the reason why I wanted to take my children, which were Black children, to this brown school is to give them something to fight for, something to write for, and something to be goddamn mad for. And I told the district, this bus better be here. I'm taking these children. Because they were trying to make me go to Inglewood. We didn't see Inglewood, been there, done that. I wanted my children to have something for Bill Gates to chew on. So when we got to the school, because I won that battle, they said, Miss Watson, because that was my pre-marriage name, this floor clean? Miss Watson, they school so big. But what hurt me more was Miss Watson. They have doors on their bathrooms. See, in South School, we didn't have doors on the bathrooms, and they gave a lot of reasons why. Whether kids smoking, kids not coming out on time, but the prison mentality, we already have a pipeline, a prison system in our schools. But one thing about it, if you treat them like animal, they're going to act like animal. So in that year, I did get a Gates Scholar. I had never had a Gates Scholar. And the reason why I believe I got a Gates Scholar is because I gave them something to write for, something to fight for, and something to be goddamn mad for.
Mm.
In the same city, you mean to tell me that children have schools like this? Children can go and everything's clean and nobody's yelling and how. I mean, just from an environmental standpoint, my heart was broken because I was a graduate of Kenwood Academy. And Kenwood, to this day, is still a fantastic school. And you really don't know the value of the schools you go to and the networks you build until you come back and you get ingrained in the work. And it is a culture shock. And it's not that we are accepting in the Black community. You know what you don't know. You know not of. And it's so much emphasis put on leadership to protect us. We think that they're doing a job, a yeoman's job, because they come back and tell us how they fought in City Hall and how the mayor was mean and how they had to duke it out. And you just got to endure this for a few more years. And then you look up, election then came, you got hoodwinked, thanks for your vote, and we're back fighting. So the rhetoric that we have accepted has been a generational growth builder of children being subjected to this foolishness for decades. I just said the school that I worked in did not have bathroom doors. Is that what Black children deserve? But is that on any newspaper? Who do you tell? I'm going to call Ghostbusters. What do I got to do? You know, they do their walkthroughs, they polish the floor, and they don't come back no more.
Well, I you know, a couple of things about this that are sticking out to me about what you say. I say it all the time that children are stupid. They see the difference between what they have and what other people have. Mm-hmm. And children go on field trips, they play sports, they do things where they're in other people's schools at times. They get a glimpse into what other people are having, and they see the difference between, and it sends them a message. The message that they receive from that, no doors on the bathrooms and stuff like that. I mean, you wouldn't have thought, or maybe I wouldn't have thought about that, but that's an observation of a child who says that to you. That's an observation of children, which tells you that they've already had cognition around these things. They already know, they're noticing things all the time. And it's sending them a signal that sticks with them. Oh, this is what society, with elders, with older people, with adults, this is what they think of me as a child, right? Because my parents thought it was okay to put me in this. And my parents don't get to see the Lord of the Rings thing I'm going through all day long. I see things from this level, and parents don't see what kids see all day long or whatnot. And they're taking these messages in. And I think we all have a collective responsibility to kind of change the context of what, not to accept these things. But I do think, and as a middle class beige person myself, I will say this much right now. The middle class plays a role in the management of oppression and poverty for the underclass, right? And we don't admit that role oftentimes, as we're trying to like present as racially solidarity type people. Like, oh no, we're in solidarity, we're all one. No, we're not all one. Because some of y'all in cities like this have benefited from the middle class system of sorting kids and getting your kids sorted into. So in some ways, some of us that are middle class and of a hue enjoy the benefits and the privileges just like others do because of economics oftentimes. And those kids that are in those schools are living in existence we would never want for our own children, but somehow it's not something we push on. And I think maybe it's people don't push on it because they want the selective enrollment. They want the sorting for their own kids, even when they share a hue. Like, we can share a color, but can we share a school? And honestly, I'm not trying to indict anybody, but I think things would move or change if middle-class people of hue were more dedicated to justice, more dedicated to making it part of their buying decisions, their voting decisions, you know, and tell me I'm wrong.
I mean, what you're saying is that middle class has a social responsibility that is undeniable, especially when they finally take that guard off, because ain't nobody safe. You know, these jobs They're here today and they're gone tomorrow. And out of the many lessons of the global pandemic, if you don't have transferable skills, you show. That's what we would say in Chicago, meaning that you are at the bending wheel of whomever cuts your check. And if you ain't signing the front of it, that's whomever cuts your check. And when you are thinking about a way out of a capitalist society, the forefront of your frontal lobe is me, myself, and I, my family. And that's what you're saying. And my children. And do you mix an apple with an orange? So I've worked in environments where we've had to share spaces with other schools. Many of these children are neighbors, cousins, and siblings. And I think it's disgusting when we divide children. Everybody, like I said in the first wave of this interview, everybody deserves a place to call home, and everybody deserves an opportunity to have equitable education. We got lost when we disembodied and Brown versus Board with equal. We got lost because it's not going to ever be equal in a capitalist society where wealth gaps continue to grow. Look at all the billionaires that were made during the global pandemic that we just don't even talk about no more because they got their coin. Because you earn a coin once you're ingrained as a billionaire and you ride off to the sunset. So now that we've created a new wealth gap that is widening exponentially to the point where I'm defining folks as poor working class. You know, you got your underclass, poor working class, and you got your middle class, if that even still exists. You know, what are you fighting for? Do you fight for yourself or do you fight for others? I choose the collective route because numbers win. People win if you're organized. And on top of organization is literacy. You got to understand what you're fighting for. And where I feel like leadership has failed, whether you're black, white, purple, or blue, is the toolkit. You don't want to share what's in the toolkit because you think that I'm coming for what you have. And that's that dogmatic society. That's when we turn on each other. I won't even blame Chicago. That's that I got mine. Now you coming for
gotta get yours.
What I've earned. Or those that have charted a path, you got to learn how to swim on your own course. Damn, bro, you just swam 100 miles and you going to make me start from the finish line. That's the difference when I think of Black leadership. Instead of you dragging me with you, you say, no, you got to earn your stripes now. So that sets us back infinite. I don't even know how many years because you're too busy trying to get me to earn my stripes as opposed to get me to where you're at because I wanted you to pass me the baton and continue the work. What's more important? I think continuing the work. If you worked. See, when you get to these seats, what have you accomplished besides your namesake? What victories, where am I standing from? And then when I look at white leadership, they're grooming. They're positioning.
Well, they're doing their, like, and listen, this is where at the, as we get closer to wrapping here, I think they're on their business. Like they're supposed to be. They rule the world. They rule the world for a reason. They were willing to do some things other people weren't able to do or willing to do. They were willing to go places morally that other people weren't morally able to go to. They are criminally insane about maintaining their advantage and their privilege, and they know where power. They know what power is and how power works, and they know that power is all that matters, right? Like, so when you accept that as your religion, when you accept power as your religion, and I understand how it moves, how it works, and what isn't power and what is power, I'm going to rule the world. So you have people that are the victims of the power hungry, and you have people that are victims of the church of power, right? Who are still trying all kinds of other ways to survive. They're not trying to be collective. They're trying to what Sharif El-Mekki said on our show multiple times is they're not like trying to end white supremacy. They're just trying to improve their position within it. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Like maintain their position within it. You use the word organize. Listen, 2021, there is no way you can tell me that we couldn't be doing more to free ourselves and liberate ourselves, especially to the point where I'm not saying that we should be walking around like conservatives and Candace Owens and others talking about bootstraps and like blaming ourselves for everything. But we should be blaming ourselves for not acting on what we know is power and what we know isn't power. We've been in this game for a long time. We've been at the wrong end of this game. We've studied the other team a lot. We know how the other team moves, and we know which one of our peoples are working for them. We know which one of our peoples. So it's not like we're not dumb. We're not inexperienced. We're not stupid. We are addicted to some things that are not productive to us in terms of our own behavior, saving ourselves, saving our children, saving ourselves, saving our communities, saving our neighborhoods. It's not like the victimization is going to stop. We didn't create Flint, Michigan. We didn't create the stuff that was done behind closed doors to us or whatnot, but we should learn from it. We should be observing it. You got an entire community that has kids with lead levels so high that it can't be remediated. Every Black county in America should be interested right now in whether or not that's happening, because I can guarantee you it probably is. Where you are right now, if you see a massive increase in special education in your local schools, I bet you need to be looking at some things that we have learned. But can we save ourselves? Can we organize? Can we like get 8 people to show up to a living room meeting to talk about these issues? If there isn't barbecue involved, if there isn't drinking involved, if there isn't, I'm gonna be critical of us, right? Because we can have a major critique for the system, but the system is doing what it's supposed to do. The system is succeeding. The system is winning. You don't like look at the winning team and critique their wins. You critique your losses.
You got on the right hat. The key word is organize. And I've had to learn a hard lesson. When I started in Chicago public schools, it wasn't about the masses. It was if you can save a few. I rebuked that for a couple years until I just accepted that everybody's not listening. As the pastor would say, under the sound of my voice, everybody can't hear and everybody can't see for a reason. So for those that are willing to follow, because I don't want everybody to follow, there's a reason why Harriet Tubman was who she was and responded the way she did. Some people had to be walked to the back of the shed, and some people wasn't meant for the voyage. And I say it just like that because of how much we've been through. So you may not speak my language and you might look just like me. However, for those that can hear me, feel me, follow me. And it's not just to follow me on Cleopatra on all the social media platforms. It's to follow me to do the work that is necessary for our salvation, because that's how critical this is. This is life or death, like you just talked about. If there's an uptick of SPED, consequently, what is it the result of? Everybody not having a special need child. So what are you feeding or giving my family? Exactly. What is the underpinnings here? Is this environmental justice? You got to be able to categorically understand what quality of life is. It's an umbrella term that fits many phases of how we're going to attack Black people. And because Illinois particularly has the most Black elected officials in the country, I'm confused, which is why I snatch chapters out of Stacey Abrams' book, because they don't have a fourth of what we got and they running circles around the white folk. Why? Because of what your hat say, organize. But you got to organize those that are conscious. If you can reach some that wasn't woke, cool. But I can't ring an alarm if you ain't never had one sound off in your head. But for those of us that are sick and tired of being sick and tired and want to be on some Fannie Lou Hamer, we need to meet. And to your point, it's okay to be reflective. The Bible says you be reflective of thyself. Even Michael Jackson said, I'm standing here looking at the man in the mirror. If you can't be honest with yourself, it's nothing I can do for you. It's nothing that I can tell you. So when I meet people that say, oh, I don't vote, it breaks my heart, because you're what they count on, because they know you exist. And they got it down to the science. I can't remember the white man name that just recently died, but he was a statistician. He had it statistically down to the science, even to gerrymandering. We are the most studied people on this planet, and they know it.
And the least taught. We're the most studied, but the least taught.
And with that being said, wrapping it up, is there hope? Absolutely. Is there an opportunity? Most definitely, which is why the vote is so critical, and that's why they hold it near and dear to their hearts. It matters.
Yeah, I don't think there's a hope. I think that there's an obligation before you die. I think the moment that you are born, you're dying. I think the moment that you are born Black, you are dying faster. And you have an obligation before you die to fight the thing that's killing you. Hope, to me, is cruel. Hope is what slave masters used to give to some of their slaves to keep them working hard and keep them moving forward. If you want to live in the matrix and turn yourself off, turn your brain off, and just like live and go through the motions, that's available to you. You can drug yourself out, and you can drug yourself with luxury or with Instagram or with consumerism or whatever you want. There's a way to go numb and to live your life and to die and have God ask you what you did, and you say, I slept because it was too painful. For everybody else, there's an obligation to fight before you die, right? And you're dying right now as you speak, and your offspring are dying too, and not just the ones that you think where you can point at other people. No, yours are too, by the way. They're dying a slower death. Maybe you're on a slow cooker death, but schools are part of that. Schools are part of a 12, 13-year diminishment of the Black mind, right? Which is a form of dying. That's a form of killing a people. So we have to do all that we possibly can. You mentioned Fannie Lou Hamer. You mentioned Stacey Abrams. Community and organizing is what people do when they have a belief that they belong together. When they lose the belief that they belong together, even in the first place, is when they become exploitable, is when you can actually just exploit their division and you can exploit them not being together. Fannie Lou was in a part of the country where Black people with a little something were facing the same challenges that Black people with nothing were facing, right? A lot of Southern places, you had even middle-class Black folks that were experiencing the same level of racism that made it clear to them we're all in the same boat.
Well,
as Black people in other places started moving, like especially in northern and more industrial places where things got a little bit more individualized or whatnot, you may have seen a breakdown in the sense that we all belong together. You mentioned people moving to the suburbs. 50% of our kids are in the suburbs now. Nobody pays attention to that. When we talk about Black kids, we just assume urban. No, it's not. Don't assume urban anymore. 50% of our kids are now living suburban existences. Are we better off? Are we better off for that? Has that improved our power?
Well, you said something that is a staple in politics. The goal is to find common ground. Fannie Lou Hamer undeniably was smart. You find the issues on where the masses can come to a consensus and understand that it impacts them both. You don't come with a one-sided gap and think that the other side is going to give a damn about it. That's not how it works. You're going to lose. From a political standpoint, because I got to put that hat on, I've ran for office. It is always strategically wise to find where there's an issue that meets the rubber for both sides to be vested in. So when we think about this, you said you don't agree with the word hope. See, in Chicago, I was just listening. I was actually just with Reverend Jesse Jackson at our Bud Billiken parade. It was the 92nd annual. And he said it best: you keep hope alive. I think for some Black people, when you talk about what's lost and what's dying, let's talk about what died. Our culture, our tongue, our essence. We're the only group of people that have no home to run to. Yeah, we go to Africa. Some of us even dare to live in Africa, but the sense of belonging is, I'm not depending on DNA for me and 90, whatever the other one is. I've done my test. I'm impressed. So we are easily infiltrated because of what the diaspora did to us. And the fact that if we're welcome into a group and you treat me right, I feel at home because I have no home to go to. I have to make a home here. In America, she makes me make a home here. And that makes me angry. But since I gotta make a home here, goddamn it, I'm gonna live the way that I know is the right way to live, the way that I deserve, and the way my people deserve, which is why I fight every day for a quality of life, in which we all deserve, because we have nowhere to go. Pushing us out the city or wherever you want Black folks to go cluster and just run away to and get out your preview ain't gonna work. It's like baby kids. We don't die, we multiply. And the more and more you keep pushing us, the more and more we keep growing. Because as Jesse Jackson said, it wasn't the factor to keep hope alive, it's to keep going. Hope is just a word, but the concept, the construct is to keep going. Because you're right, the moment you breathe is the moment you land on this earth. The concept is you eventually expire. But in that time that you were here, how did you serve? That's all it boils down to. Your impact.
I love that. How did you serve?
Everybody has, when I used to have my students, there's a place for everybody. What I see in my lifetime is people are discarded more than anything. And there's a place for everybody. When you talk about a quality of life and you can't picture where people belong, you're not the best to lead. Because there's a place for everybody.
Well, I think the place for some people is hell. And we're finding that out day by day. And not everybody is meant to do everything. So there's some people that we don't want in our, we want a big tent, but we don't need to be rocking with everybody in our big tent. And I do think where you and I will agree on all of this is activism matters, leadership matters, organizing matters, like people matter, like people coming together with a common cause matter. Strategy is hard, and strategy is not something we're taught in school. Like, good strategy people in campaigns. I see people all the time that like want to run for things. And I'm trying to get more people to run for school board, to be very honest with you, because I think it's an accessible part of the democracy where people can serve and lead. But you start noticing right away, who's going to be where are the campaign managers? Where are the people that have who understand how campaigns work and all that? So we need infrastructure if we want to win. We want to start building a successful campaign for our children, for others. We need infrastructure, but we need to start with people like you. We need fire starters first. Like, we need people that stand up and say, I'm tired and I'm going to lead and whatever. We just mentioned Fannie Lou's name, and we can mention a whole bunch of others that in her long line. And I hope there are going to be more people who follow that tradition to just stand up and say, I'm sick and tired or whatnot, and then have the smarts to bring people into a movement. So I appreciate you and all the work that you're doing on behalf of indigenizing power, meaning having people lead where they're from, right? Like, lead where you're from, and getting away from the performative and getting into the practical. Let me know how I can help. Let everybody else know how they can help. Now, let our people know how they can find you and they can support your ascension to president. So how do we do this right now?
First of all, thank you again for the opportunity. Yes, I can be a little fire starter, but I don't have no shame in it. I'm very passionate about topics that matter when it comes to how we live and what's impacting Black people. I can be followed at Follow Cleopatra on all social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. In addition to that, I am the founder of Roses and Roseland. And I created this concept because oftentimes when you think of Roseland in Chicago is known to be one of the most notoriously violent communities, I rebuke it. There's some phenomenal people. Oh my God, amazing people that are characterized in such a way that is so derogatory. I think it's shameful. So I'm not the only rose that came from the concrete. I got about 36,000 this way, plus, in the 9th Ward here in Chicago. And not to mention the children, because the other 14,000 are children. So when you think about opportunities of just naming, characterization, it matters because the goal is to empower and inspire. And when you look at my shirt, yes, that is a Black woman. She has a rosy afro. Oftentimes people think, oh, that's you. It ain't about me. I serve every week in our food pantries because I live food apartheid. One point in time, I used to say food desert, but I've now grown to learn and accept that nothing grows in a desert. And wherever Black people are at, there are talent and growth all around us. And because I live food apartheid in this moment under poor leadership, I serve and I bring produce. And every place that I serve, out of all 4 pantries and 2 elder homes, it is led by Black women, elder Black women. And I give my rose to them. My hat is off to them, and I thank them because if it had not been for them, how will we eat? We will starve. But that's what Black women do. We bring strength, we bring character, and we bring roses. So I thank you for the opportunity. How can you help? Follow the website. Go to rosesandroseland.com. Get involved. If you want to donate, what we tend to do is support all kinds of events. This weekend, All Gale is having their 49th. All Gale Murray Homes is having their 49th back to school parade. I look forward to being there. I'm 9 months pregnant. Still gonna come bring my roses and donate. They need coolers and ice, and I'm bringing roses their way, literally. In addition to that, we have 100 Black Men Heal, create a space for brothers that have lost their lives and fighting and on the precipice of being subjected to prostate cancer. So that's next month, September 26th. I hold a sacred space for them. And I hope to grow this to a magnitude in which we are equitably supporting both breast cancer and prostate cancer because Black men are under attack. So I do a lot in that regard because no matter which way we look at it, from a public health to public safety to schools, overarching just our quality of life, you're right. Black people are dying faster because no matter which way we cut it, we just can't win. But together we can if we organize.
I love it. That's the message for today. That's a whole word. That's not going to replace your prayers for today, but that will replace a lot of what else you're going to hear today. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate you and appreciate everybody who has listened and watched, who gives me your time in the mornings to like your brunch time, your time between breakfast and lunch to talk about how we do better by our children, how we do better by our obligation and our responsibility to be active for our children, not to be thinkers or think piece people, but to be actors for our children who act, who get up in the morning and fight for their lives. So thank you all for listening and watching. Please, if you have liked this show, share it, like it, send it to your friends and family, wrap it up, send it to them for Christmas. Tell them this is the best thing you ever going to have. Do it all.